Welcome to English Grammar 1, Unit 31. Have to and must. Both have to and must express necessity, obligation, and prohibition. I have to do something. It is necessary to do it. I am obliged to do it. You can't turn right here. You have to turn left. Here we speak about a sign, a traffic light, a traffic sign that shows you are supposed to turn left. This is the rule. This is the external rule. So the speaker used here have to. So have to is used to express external obligation. Means it is objective. Example number 2. I have to wear glasses for reading. Here I have eye weakness. So this is external obligation. So I am forced to wear glasses. So I use have to here. I say I have to wear glasses for reading. And if you look to the form of have to and must, have to is followed by base form and must is followed by base form. To express a present obligation or necessity or future. In the future you use with have to, we use will, or we use must alone plus the base form. But let's here discuss the following examples, then we will go for the uses or the forms of have to and must. Example number 3, George can't come out with us this evening. He has to work late. The rules of his job or the commitment of his job. So this is external obligation. It is objective. So we say he has to work late, and here has is used because he is singular, so we use has to. Last week, Tina broke her arm and had to go to hospital. Here we speak about past obligation, so we use had to plus the base form. The past of have to is had to plus the base form. And here it is external obligation. I haven't, the last example here, I haven't had to go to the doctor for ages. And here we speak about external obligation. I don't have any illnesses, so I don't need to go to the doctor. So I say I haven't had to go to the doctor for ages. Indicates a present perfect. That's why we use haven't plus had to. The past participle of have to is had to. Then comes the base form go. Basically, if we speak of have to and must, I can say I have to study, he has to study, you have to study, they have to study, we have to study. And he is here singular, that's why we use has instead of have, so it becomes he has to study or she has to study. In the case of must, we say I must study, you must study, he must study, she must study, they must study, you must study. We have the same form, must, with all the pronouns. with all kinds of subjects, plural or singular. Must is followed by the base form. But if we speak of have to, in the case of singular, we use has to. With he and she, we use has to. To speak about the past, we don't use must, we use the past of have to. Then I say, I had to study, he had to study, she had to study, they had to study, we had to study. This is for the past. In the case of past, we use had to. In the case of future, we can say you must study, I must study, he must study. Okay, but with have to, we say if we want to use will, we use will plus have to. We don't use will plus must. So we say, I will have to study, you will have to study, he will have to study, she will have to study, they will have to study. This is for future. We use do, does, did in questions and negative sentences to form negative sentences of have to, and to form questions we use do, does, did. Then here we speak about have to as if it is a main verb, so we need to use auxiliary verb or helping verb to form questions and to form negative. So we use do, does, and did. But in the case of must, we don't use does and did. We use the must as an auxiliary verb, as a model verb, so we move it forward in questions, and we put not with must in negative. Here we speak about have to form a question. By have to, we use do. So what do I have to do to get a new driving license? Here we use do to form the question, because have to is considered as a main verb, so we need to form a question by adding do, since the subject is considered here plural. We don't say what have I to do. We don't use have here as a modal verb and forward it and reverse it with the subject. No, we use it as a main verb, so we need to use helping verb or auxiliary verb do or does or did. Here the case is present and plural, so we use do. In the second example, Karen doesn't have to work Saturdays, and here we speak about negative of have to, and the negative of have to, and Karen here is singular, so the if it is positive we say Karen has to work Saturdays, and to make it negative, since it is singular, we use does. Then we say Karen hasn't, and has is changed into its basic form or its base form have, so it becomes Karen hasn't, the Karen doesn't have to work Saturdays. So we don't say Karen hasn't to work. We say Karen doesn't have to work. We use does here because has is considered as a main verb. It is not considered as a modal verb to add not to it directly. In the third example, why did you have to leave early? And here we speak a past situation, and we speak about obligation. In the past situation, we use had to in the sentence. I had to leave early. We say I had to leave early because we speak about a past obligation. And to form a question, we use did, and had is changed back into its base form have to. So it becomes, why did you have to leave early? you can use have to with will and might and may. To express future, we use will and we use have to, we don't use must. And to express possibility, we use have to, we don't use must. So we say to express future, we say if the pain gets worse, you will have to go to the doctor. We use will plus have to plus the base form. This is a future obligation using have to. So in other forms other than the present, we use in the future and in the past we use have to. So we don't say you will must. No, it is incorrect. We say you will have to go to the doctor. Again, in possibility, we use have to along with may or might, so it becomes I might have to work late tomorrow evening, or I may have to work late tomorrow evening. It is possible that I will have to work late tomorrow evening. And here with may and might, we use have to plus the base form work. We don't use must. So we don't say I might must work or I may must work. It is incorrect. We say I might have to. We use have to instead of must in other forms of verbs other than present. Part B, must is similar to have to. Here we are going to speak about must. It is later than I thought. I must go or I have to go. If we say I must go, this is personal obligation. I decided to go, so I say I must go, or I have to go. If I say I have to go, that means there might be a certain external obligation. I don't decide myself. There is something which force me to go. External obligation, objective. We use have to. So we say the person says I have to. When the person say I must go, we understand that this is personal obligation, subjective. It is decided by the person, not by external forces or external source. You can use must to give your own opinion. We can use must also to express our own opinion, means personal opinion. For example, to say what you think is necessary, to express necessity, or to recommend someone to do something, we use must. Have to is also possible, but here must is more common. We say I haven't spoken to Sue for ages. I must phone her. I say this is necessary. I express this necessity. I decided that I must phone her. This is personal decision, personal opinion. Mark is a really nice person. You must meet him. This is my personal opinion, my personal point of view. I recommend this. I recommend the other person to meet Mark. So I say you must meet him. So to express personal view or personal opinion, we use must plus the base form. We use have to, not must, to say what someone is obliged to do. The speaker is not giving his or her own opinion. Here, in the case of have to, we speak about external forces, or we speak about a fact, or we speak about rules. Rules are set by using have to, means you have external power which force you to do something. So I have to work from 8:30 to 5:30 every day. This is the rule of my job. This is the rule of my job. This is external power. It is not my decision. It is not my own personal opinion. No, I am forced to do by external power. Jane has to travel a lot for her work. The work requires her to travel a lot. So this is external power. This is external obligation. It is not personal opinion or personal decision. That's why we use here has to, because Jane is singular. We use has, not have. So we say Jane has to travel a lot for her work. But must is often used in written rules and instructions. If we think of must, we find the rules which are used, or external power or external source, which use have to. If we speak about written rules or instructions, then we find them used by using must. So applications for the job must be received by 18th May. This must be written in the advertisement about for the job. It is a written rule. So the rule is written here. So we find the rule written by using must. But if we speak about rules in general, like suppose a person wants to drive a car, he has to get a driving license. It is a rule to have a driving license in order to drive a car. So we say he has to get a driving license. But here, suppose in the exam and students are asked to write in ink, so you will find a written rule on the paper of the exam, and you will find certain instruction there written. So you find you must write your answers in ink, and here it is exam instruction and written. So since it is written, it is used by it is written by using must plus the base form. If suppose the teacher wants to say it directly to students like this, so the teacher may say you have to write your answers in ink. But if it is written, we find it written using must. You cannot use must to talk about the past. To express past obligation, we don't use must, because must is not used in the past. So we use have to in the past, so it becomes had to. So we say we had to leave early. Not, we don't say we must leave early. We say we had to leave early to express the past. We use the past of have to, so it becomes we had to leave early. C. Part C. Mustn't and don't have to are completely different. If we think of mustn't, the negative of must, there is obligation not to do something. There is obligation not to do something. And if we think of don't have to, the negative of have to, then it becomes don't have to. There is no obligation. Here, there is absence of obligation. With don't have to, the person has the choice to do something or not. But in the case of must, in the negative, mustn't means there is obligation but not to do. There is obligation but not to do. You mustn't do something. It is necessary that you don't do it. So don't do it means there is obligation not to do it. So for example, you say you must keep it a secret. You mustn't tell anyone. There is obligation not to tell anyone. So we say you mustn't tell anyone. There is obligation not to tell anyone. Example number 2, I promised I would be on time. I promised I would be on time. I mustn't be late. There is obligation not to be late. So the person says, I mustn't be late. I must be on time. On the other hand, if you think of have to, the negative of have to, we say you don't have to do something, means you don't need to do it, but you can if you want. But if you want to do it, you can. That means it is optional. The person has the choice to do or not to do. Means there is absence of obligation. There is absence of obligation. There is no obligation. So we say, for example, you don't have to tell him, but you can if you want. So it is up to you whether to tell him or not to tell him. You are not forced to tell him. So if you want, you don't have to tell him. You don't need to tell him. If you want to tell him, you can tell. That means it is optional. It is up to you to decide. Second example, I don't have to be at the meeting, but I think I'll go anyway. I am not forced to be at the meeting, but if I want to go, I'll go. Means it is up to me to decide. D. You can use have got to instead of have to. In spoken language, you can use have got to instead of have to. So you can say, I have got to work tomorrow, or I have to work tomorrow. When has Liz got to go, or when does Liz have to go? And in the case of have got to, have is an auxiliary verb, so we move it forward in the question. So it becomes, when has Liz got to go? But in the case of have to is considered as a main verb, so we need to use do, does, and did in the question. That's why the question becomes, when does Liz have to go? If we want to use future, in the case of future, we say, I will have to visit, I will have to go. But we don't say, I will have got to go. After will, we don't use have got to. After will, we can use have to only. That's all. Thank you.